What if I told you the reason people overlook you, underestimate you, or even walk all over you is because you've been taught to play the game all wrong? You've been told to be nice, to be transparent, to put yourself out there. But in reality, those same habits quietly burn away your influence and tear down your defenses. The Stoics warned about this centuries ago. Stop chasing approval and start building the kind of power that doesn't need permission. Today, we're going to strip away the illusions, face the uncomfortable truth about why you give away your power, and uncover the timeless strategies to reclaim it without ever raising your voice. If you're ready to stop living on other people's terms and start shaping your life with discipline, wisdom, and unshakable presence, consider subscribing. As a promise to yourself that from this moment on, you'll choose growth over comfort, truth over illusion, and mastery over mediocrity. Rule 1. Let them underestimate you. Most people spend their lives trying to prove themselves at every opportunity. They talk too much in meetings, rush to share their accomplishments, and try to convince everyone in the room how competent they are. But here's the thing, real strength isn't loud. It's not in the frantic need to be noticed. It's in the ability to sit still while others underestimate you and quietly let them write the wrong story about you. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best way to defend yourself is to not be like your enemy." In other words, you don't need to mirror the noise of the crowd. You can choose the discipline of patience. You can let them believe they've read you, when in reality, they've only seen the cover of the book. Think about the last time you met someone who didn't feel the need to fill the silence. They just observed. They didn't compete for attention. They didn't seem bothered by what others thought. There's something magnetic about that kind of presence. It pulls you in because you can't quite figure it out. This is where letting people underestimate you becomes a strategic advantage. When you stop trying to prove you're the smartest person in the room, you free yourself from the exhausting performance of constantly being on. And at the same time, you allow others to relax around you. They stop hiding their intentions. They reveal their strategies. They drop their guard, and that's when the real opportunities open up. Seneca reminded us, "He who is brave is free." The bravery here is not in confronting people head-on every time, but in holding back when your ego wants to jump forward. It's the courage to allow misjudgment, knowing it's temporary and that it serves your long game. The people who succeed in life, in business, and in influence are rarely the ones broadcasting their every move. They are the ones collecting quiet victories, positioning themselves carefully, and striking only when the impact will be impossible to ignore. There's another benefit to this approach. It frees you from unnecessary battles. If you're constantly trying to prove yourself, you'll find yourself fighting every small challenge, defending every minor opinion. But when you allow others to think you're less capable than you really are, you avoid being dragged into petty conflicts. You reserve your energy for the moments that truly matter. You create space between their assumptions and your reality, and in that space, you're untouchable. Aristotle once said, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." If you understand your own strengths deeply, you don't need the constant validation of showing them off. You know what you can do. You don't need applause to confirm it. This inner security is what allows you to sit back and watch others rush to expose themselves. And they will, because most people can't handle being underestimated. Their egos can't take it. They'll go to great lengths to prove themselves, and in doing so, they'll reveal the very things you can later use to your advantage. Plato put it well when he said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something." If you want to master the art of being underestimated, you have to be comfortable with saying nothing when there's nothing that needs to be said. Your restraint will be misread as weakness, and that's exactly what you want. Because when the time comes to speak or act, The contrast will be unforgettable. In the end, letting people underestimate you isn't about playing small, it's about playing smart. It's not about hiding your abilities forever. It's about revealing them at the exact moment when their impact will be greatest. And when that moment comes, you won't need to announce yourself. The results will do that for you. The key is patience, self-awareness, and the quiet confidence that you don't have to win every round to win the game. You just have to choose your moment. If you can master that, if you can let go of the need to prove yourself constantly, you'll find that the world becomes easier to navigate. The noise fades, the games people play become clearer, and you'll see that sometimes the surest path to power is the one that looks like you're not even walking it. Rule 2. Charm beats truth. Have you ever noticed that the person who gets promoted, wins people over, or closes the deal isn't always the one with the best skills or the most facts? More often than not, it's the one who makes people feel something positive in their presence. They don't win because they told the absolute truth in every situation. They win because they became someone others wanted to be around. Facts might change a mind, but feelings change behavior. And when people feel good around you, they'll naturally open doors you could never push open by force. The Stoics understood the value of influence, though they warned not to use it carelessly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts are grounded in calmness, kindness, and goodwill, those qualities will quietly spill over into the way you speak, the way you move, and the way people experience you. You don't need to stand on a stage and declare your intentions. Your presence will already communicate them. Charm isn't about being fake. It's not about flattery for the sake of flattery or pretending to agree when you don't. True charm is simply the skill of making people feel seen, respected, and understood. Carl Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." When you interact with someone in a way that genuinely makes them feel valued, you create a reaction that lingers long after the conversation ends. That reaction can be more powerful than any argument or logical case you could present. But here's where the power of charm becomes truly strategic. When people believe you're good, their guard drops. They stop scanning your every word for hidden motives. They stop assuming you're out to outsmart them. And in that space of lowered defenses, you gain the ability to guide the interaction where it needs to go, not through manipulation, but through the natural trust you've built. This is where the Stoic principle of self-control comes in. Epictetus taught that it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. When you can keep your tone calm and your demeanor warm, even under pressure, you demonstrate the kind of inner discipline that makes others lean toward you instead of away from you. Think of the times you've been in a heated discussion. If one person stays calm, listens attentively, and even smiles when tensions rise, it changes the entire mood. The other person might still disagree with them, but they'll respect their composure. Over time, that respect becomes influence. And influence built on warmth tends to last longer than influence built on fear. People are persuaded less by pure reason and more by the way you make them feel in the moment. That's why charm can often outperform the truth. It's not that truth doesn't matter, it does, but truth delivered without emotional intelligence can feel cold, even hostile. Truth wrapped in empathy, however, is received with an open mind. In practical terms, developing this kind of charm means shifting your focus away from "what do I need to say" to "how do I want them to feel?" Do you want them to feel heard, respected, encouraged? Even in disagreement, you can aim for them to feel safe expressing themselves. The more people feel safe with you, the more they'll listen when you speak. The Stoics were clear that charm must be anchored in integrity. Without it, it turns into manipulation. But with it, charm becomes a tool for harmony, collaboration, and even leadership. Seneca wrote, "Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness." That's the essence of authentic charm. Not charm as a mask, but charm as a reflection of a disciplined and intentional inner state. Here's the paradox. When you stop trying so hard to prove that you're good and simply act in ways that feel good to others, they decide for themselves that you are good. And once they've decided that, they'll trust your guidance almost instinctively. They'll follow your lead, not because you forced them to, but because they want to. In the end, charm beats truth, not because charm is more important, but because charm opens the door for truth to actually be heard. Without the first, the second often falls on deaf ears. When you master this balance, warmth anchored in discipline, kindness paired with clarity, you'll find that people don't just listen to you. They invite you in, they seek your opinion, and they make space for your influence in ways you could never demand. And that is a form of power no amount of blunt honesty can match. Rule 3. Be a mystery on purpose. Have you ever met someone you just couldn't figure out? They didn't fit neatly into any box. One moment they were open and expressive, the next they were distant and unreadable. And instead of losing interest, you found yourself thinking about them even more. That's the quiet power of mystery. It pulls attention without asking for it. People are naturally drawn to what they can't fully understand. Carl. When you keep parts of yourself hidden, you allow that transformation to happen slowly, giving the other person just enough to react to, never the whole story. The Stoics valued moderation in all things, including how much of yourself you reveal. If you constantly share every thought, every feeling, and every plan, you give away the very color of your soul before someone has earned the right to see it. Mystery is not about deception. It's about discernment. It's choosing what to reveal and when, based on wisdom, not impulse. In a world where oversharing has become the norm, a touch of unpredictability is magnetic. When you're always the same, always available, always predictable, people stop paying attention. They think they've already figured you out, so their curiosity fades. But when you shift your rhythm, sometimes engaging deeply, other times holding back, you spark questions. Why did they say it that way? What are they thinking right now? That mental loop keeps you on their mind long after you've left the conversation. Being a mystery on purpose starts with knowing yourself well enough to control your own patterns. This isn't about playing games, it's about self-command. You decide when to step forward and when to step back, when to speak and when to let silence hang in the air. In doing so, you become less of an open book and more of a story they can't stop trying to read. From a psychological standpoint, mystery works because the human mind craves closure. When someone doesn't give you all the answers, your brain tries to fill the gaps. It replays conversations, searches for meaning, and assigns significance to even small details. That's why silence can sometimes speak louder than words. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus advised, "Be silent for the most part, or say only what is necessary." Silence invites interpretation. Interpretation fuels curiosity, and curiosity keeps you relevant in the minds of others without you having to fight for attention. Think about the most compelling leaders, artists, or thinkers you admire. Rarely are they the ones constantly explaining themselves. More often, they leave space for others to wonder. They're selective in their appearances, deliberate in their words, and intentional with their presence. That's not by accident, it's strategy. They understand that mystery creates gravity, and gravity pulls people in. Being mysterious doesn't mean you should be inconsistent in your values or unreliable in your commitments. Stoicism teaches the importance of integrity. Your moral compass should remain steady. What changes is your expression. Sometimes you give the world a glimpse of your boldness. Other times, you let them sit with your quiet. It's the rhythm between the two that makes people pay attention. Seneca once wrote, "It is a rough road that leads to the heights of greatness. Part of that road is learning restraint, resisting the urge to make yourself entirely knowable to everyone you meet. The truth is, when people feel they have fully figured you out, they stop investing energy into the relationship. But when they're never quite sure which side of you they'll meet, they stay engaged, curious, and often more respectful of your space." The beauty of purposeful mystery is that it puts you in control of your own narrative. You decide which chapters are read and which remain closed for now. You decide what parts of your life and mind are shared freely and what remains yours alone. This control not only strengthens your influence, it protects your peace. Because not everyone needs to know everything about you, and not everyone has earned that right. When you live with this kind of intentional rhythm, you create a presence people can't ignore. They may not understand you completely, and that's exactly the point. The less they know for certain, the more they'll keep coming back, hoping for another piece of the puzzle, and in that quiet pull, you hold a power far greater than constant exposure could ever give you. Rule 4. Show results, hide the process. There's a reason some of the most impactful people in history seem to appear out of nowhere with their achievements. They didn't broadcast their struggles, their experiments, or their failures in real time. They worked in silence, away from the noise, and only revealed their work when it was undeniable. In a world obsessed with showing every step, there's something incredibly powerful about moving quietly and letting the results speak for themselves. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." The same principle applies here. Stop talking about what you're building and start becoming the person who simply delivers. When you expose the process too early, you invite opinions, doubts, and even sabotage. People start forming expectations before you're ready. Some may even try to outpace you, copy you, or subtly undermine you. Carl Jung observed, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Becoming that person is a deeply personal journey, and it doesn't always belong in public view. Protecting your process is not secrecy out of fear. It's clarity about what deserves to grow without interference. The Stoics often spoke about control, and Epictetus taught, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." Notice he didn't say, "Tell the world first." By keeping your methods close to your chest, you allow yourself the freedom to make mistakes, test ideas, and change direction without the pressure of constant observation. The fewer eyes on your work while it's still forming, the more room you have to adjust it into something truly remarkable. Think of it like planting a seed. You don't dig it up every day to show people how it's growing. You let the roots form in darkness. You water it, you nurture it, and only when it breaks through the surface does the world get to see the life you've been cultivating. If you keep lifting it from the soil for approval, you kill its chance to grow strong. Your projects, goals, and visions work the same way. Sharing your process too soon not only opens you to external judgment, but it also tempts you into seeking validation rather than clarity. You might find yourself performing progress instead of making it, creating the appearance of movement without actually moving forward. Hiding the process forces you to stay honest with yourself because you're not playing for the applause of an audience. You're working for the integrity of the outcome. There's also a psychological advantage to unveiling results without warning. When people can't track your every step, they stop preparing against you. They can't anticipate your moves because they have no idea what you're working on. This unpredictability can be a form of quiet power. As Seneca said, the greatest remedy for anger is delay. In this context, the delay is not about anger. It's about the satisfaction of waiting until the right moment to reveal what you've accomplished. That moment hits harder because no one saw it coming. Hiding the process also gives you ownership over your narrative. When you present only the finished product, you control the story that gets told. You can frame it from a place of strength instead of letting others interpret your stumbles along the way. It's not about pretending you never faced obstacles. It's about choosing when and how to share them, so the focus stays on the strength you built, not the setbacks you endured. The truth is, in a culture addicted to constant updates, silence can feel like a disruption. People will wonder why you're so quiet. Some might underestimate you. Others might assume you've stopped moving entirely. And that's fine. Let them think that. Because while they're busy guessing, you're busy building. The final reveal will not only surprise them, it will also reset the way they see you. In the end, showing results and hiding the process is about discipline. It's about trusting that you don't need to prove your progress every step of the way. You only need to prove it once, and that's when it's done. Until then, guard your work like a craftsman guards his tools, not out of fear of theft, but out of respect for the craft itself. Rule 5. Perfect isn't memorable, flaws are. Have you ever met someone who seemed flawless, perfectly dressed, perfectly spoken, never making a mistake? Impressive at first, sure. But after a while, that perfection starts to feel distant, untouchable, and in time, forgettable. Perfection doesn't give people anything to connect to. What they remember, what sticks with them, are the moments where you let the mask slip, just enough for them to see the person behind the image. That one unguarded laugh, that honest admission, that moment of vulnerability, those are the threads people hold on to. Stoicism teaches that striving for virtue is a journey, not a flawless performance. When you present yourself as absolutely perfect, you rob others of the chance to see your growth, your humanity, and your ability to rise after setbacks. And in a strange way, you make it harder for people to trust you, because perfection often feels like a wall, not a bridge. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Accepting yourself means embracing the truth that you are both strong and flawed, capable and imperfect. Showing people only your polished side might earn admiration, but showing them that you're still human, that you've had to work, stumble and get back up, earns loyalty and respect. That's because people don't relate to perfection. They relate to resilience. Think about your favorite characters in books or films. Are they perfect? Probably not. They're memorable because they're layered. They have weaknesses, doubts, and moments where they falter. Those moments make their triumphs mean something. The same is true in real life. If all people ever see from you is perfection, they have nothing to chase, nothing to wonder about. But if you give them 90% of your story and leave the last 10% in the shadows, you create a sense of intrigue that lingers. Yourself includes knowing where you fall short and owning it. This isn't about confessing every mistake or exposing every flaw. It's about showing enough humanity to make people feel they can approach you, understand you, and even learn from you. When you reveal a controlled imperfection, a moment where your emotions show, a quick glimpse of struggle, it makes you real. And real lasts longer in memory than perfect ever will. The Stoics also understood the danger of vanity. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." In the same way, it's not the person who is flawed who loses influence. It's the one who craves constant perfection. never allowing others to see the truth beneath the surface. People admire skill, but they connect to honesty. Perfection can be admired from a distance, but flaws create closeness. When you share a glimpse of your humanity, it gives people permission to embrace their own. That shared recognition becomes a bond, and that bond, rooted in authenticity, often carries more influence than the most polished image you could ever present. In the end, perfection may shine brightly for a moment, but it's the subtle, human details, the cracks in the mask, that stay with people for years. Leave space for curiosity. Leave room for them to wonder about the parts of you they've never seen, because when they sense there's more beneath the surface, they'll keep thinking about you long after the conversation is over. Rule 6. Speak less than you want to. Most people can't handle silence. It makes them uncomfortable. They rush to fill it with words, often without realizing how much they're giving away. That's why those who can master silence hold an invisible advantage. They don't waste energy trying to win every exchange with words. They speak with purpose, then let the pause do the rest of the work. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, the one who speaks less often ends up being the one everyone listens to. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." That's more than a moral guideline, it's a strategy. The fewer words you speak, the more weight each one carries. When you're selective with your speech, people learn to pay attention because they know you won't speak unless it matters. Carl Jung offered another perspective. In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. Silence is part of that secret order. When emotions are high, especially in conflict, most people become reactive. They speak to defend themselves, to fill the tension, to prove a point. But when you remain calm and say only what's necessary, you control the rhythm of the interaction. Your composure becomes unsettling to others because it forces them to sit with their own thoughts. The Stoics practiced restraint as a form of discipline. Epictetus taught, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. The more you listen, the more you understand. And the more you understand, the more power you have, not over others in a manipulative way, but over yourself and how you choose to engage." Silence isn't passivity, it's active observation. You're studying body language, tone, word choice. You're noticing the small cracks in someone's confidence or logic that you'd miss if you were too busy talking. Think about negotiations. The best negotiators know that silence is often the strongest move. They make their point, then let it hang. That pause creates pressure. The other person starts talking to ease that pressure. And in doing so, they often reveal more than they intended. This works outside of formal negotiations too, at work, in personal relationships, even in casual conversations. The less you speak, the more others feel compelled to fill the space. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. People might misinterpret your silence as weakness, but over time they'll learn it's calculation, and that realization will shift how they approach you. Silence also gives you control over your emotional state. When you pause before responding, you give yourself time to think, to choose your words carefully, to ensure you're not speaking from impulse. This is one of the purest forms of Stoic practice, choosing action based on reason, not emotion. And when you do speak after a pause, your words will carry the weight of thought and intention. The beauty of speaking less is that it makes your rare words unforgettable. People will remember the moment you broke your silence because it will feel deliberate. It's the contrast between stillness and movement that creates impact. Just like in music, the pauses are as important as the notes. They give meaning and shape to the sound. In the end, speaking less than you want to isn't about holding back forever. It's about creating space for the truth to emerge. It's about listening deeply, choosing your moments, and letting your presence speak as loudly as your voice. When you master that balance, you don't just join the conversation, you direct it, even when you're silent. Rule 7. Blur friend and rival. People are quick to categorize. It's in our nature to label people as friend or foe, ally or adversary. This instinct goes back to survival. Knowing who was safe and who was a threat was essential. But in the modern world, those labels can be used against you. If someone marks you too quickly as a competitor, they'll keep their guard up. They'll watch you, anticipate you, and even work to limit your moves. On the other hand, if you're immediately seen as an ally, they'll let you in, but may never take you seriously as a potential equal. That's why one of the most powerful positions you can occupy is the space between, where they're not quite sure what you are to them. You're close enough to share ideas and resources, but distant enough to remain unpredictable. That uncertainty keeps them off balance and gives you an advantage few people ever think to cultivate. Epictetus taught, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." You can't control how people will ultimately choose to label you, but you can influence the clues they're given. You can control how much of your true intention they see. You can present parts of yourself that make them comfortable while keeping the parts that give you an edge tucked away until the moment they matter most. This is about positioning, not deception. You're not pretending to be something you're not. You're simply not giving them the full story until it's time. Think about politics, business, or even close-knit communities. The people who last the longest aren't the ones who constantly draw battle lines, nor are they the ones who blindly trust everyone. They are the ones who can sit at any table, speak to any side, and leave others unsure of where their true allegiance lies. This doesn't make them duplicitous, it makes them adaptable. And adaptability, in the Stoic sense, is one of the highest forms of resilience. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that life was unpredictable and that rigidity was the enemy of survival. If you're fixed in your role, people will know exactly how to use or counter you. If you're fluid, they'll never quite know what to expect. Bravery in this context is the willingness to move between these roles without fearing judgment. Most people cling to labels because labels feel safe. If they're the loyal friend, they don't risk accusations of betrayal. If they're the fierce competitor, they don't risk being underestimated. But both labels are prisons. They trap you in predictable behavior. When you blur the line, you give yourself the freedom to respond to each situation as it is, not as people expect it to be. And in that freedom, you find space to operate strategically without unnecessary resistance. Let's bring this into a practical example. Imagine you're in a corporate environment, and there's someone in your department who's clearly ambitious. They're watching you, measuring your progress against theirs. If you position yourself as their open rival, they'll compete aggressively. They'll cut off information, form alliances against you, and block your moves. But if you position yourself as a helpful colleague, complementing their work, supporting their ideas, they'll relax. They'll open doors. They may even share information freely. All the while, you're observing, learning their strategies, and preparing your own moves. When the right opportunity appears, you can act decisively, and they'll never have seen it coming. If you habitually cultivate this balance, being warm enough to invite trust, but reserved enough to protect your advantage, you build a reputation for being approachable, yet hard to pin down. People will be drawn to you because you don't set off alarm bells, but they'll also respect you because they can't fully read you. And when they can't read you, they can't predict you. This approach also works on a psychological level because it plays into the human discomfort with uncertainty. People want to know where you stand. If they can't figure it out, they keep paying attention. They keep trying to gather information on you. And in doing so, they remain engaged with you, mentally, emotionally, and strategically, while you quietly move according to your own plan. The Stoics would caution, though, that this strategy should never devolve into deceit for deceit's sake. The goal isn't to manipulate people into ruin, it's to position yourself so that you can act freely without unnecessary obstacles. If your long-term goal is aligned with virtue, as Stoicism insists it should be, then the blurring of roles is simply a way of removing friction from the path ahead. It's about removing premature conflict, not about betraying trust that's been genuinely earned. Practical application can be subtle. Compliment someone's work genuinely, even if you plan to surpass it. Offer help when it costs you little but earns you goodwill. Be willing to sit quietly in a meeting, letting others think you're on board with their direction, while you quietly prepare an alternative plan. Sometimes you may even agree with a rival publicly, not because you've abandoned your position, but because you know it's not yet the right moment to reveal your stance. Timing is as important as perception here. Seneca put it simply, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Blurring the line is a form of preparation. You're ensuring that opportunities aren't closed off to you before they even appear. You're staying in the game, close enough to watch the board, but not so obvious that you become the next target. And when that opportunity comes, you're ready to act. Not because you fought your way through a barricade, but because you walked through a door no one thought to lock. In the end, to blur the line between friend and rival is to choose the space of greatest mobility. It's the middle ground where you can observe, adapt, and decide on your own terms. It's not about playing both sides. It's about refusing to be forced into a single role that limits your freedom. It's a skill that requires restraint, self-awareness, and patience, but it pays off in ways open confrontation rarely does. And the ultimate sign you've mastered it. They'll speak well of you in one room while wondering about you in another. And all the while you'll be exactly where you want to be, moving freely while they're still trying to figure you out. Rule 8. Make them comfortable before you move. In any competitive environment, whether it's business, politics, social circles, or even family dynamics, people guard themselves most fiercely when they sense a threat. If they think you're coming for their position, their influence, or their advantage, they'll watch you like a hawk. They'll close doors before you can walk through them. They'll prepare defenses before you've even made a move. But human nature also works the other way. When people believe you're not a danger to them, their vigilance fades. The shoulders drop, the pace slows, and it's in that moment of relaxation, when the walls are down, that opportunities appear wide open. The wisest strategy isn't always to push aggressively for what you want. Often, it's to first make them feel entirely at ease, as if you're an ally in their success, not a rival standing in their way. If your competition plays the game by direct confrontation, meeting force with force, you gain the upper hand by being the opposite, calm, agreeable, and even encouraging. There is a certain disarming magic in genuinely supporting someone's moves, nodding along to their ideas, and making them believe you're in alignment with them. Not only does this lower their guard, but it also changes the energy of the interaction. They see you as part of their momentum, not an obstacle to it. And when someone feels you're on their side, they stop defending themselves from you entirely. Carl Jung observed, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people." This applies here in a very practical way. If you know your own ambition, your desire to advance, to win, to claim space, you can control it instead of letting it leak into your words and actions. That self-awareness is the difference between someone who reveals their intentions too early and someone who can keep their true aim quiet until the right moment. Jung's insight also reminds us that the instinct to protect ourselves is deeply rooted in everyone. If you want to move without resistance, you have to soothe that instinct in others before you act. Here, bravery is the patience to wait until the right moment, rather than forcing the outcome early. Many people mistake speed for strength, rushing into action as soon as they see what they want. But true strength is in holding back, knowing the opportunity will still be there. Only now it will be easier to take because no one's defending it. The freedom in this approach comes from moving when you choose, not when circumstances push you. In practical terms, this might mean actively participating in someone's success, even if you intend to move past them eventually. You help them prepare for their big presentation, knowing that the more they trust you, the more they'll involve you in projects. You praise their leadership in public, knowing that it cements you in their mind as a loyal supporter. Over time, your position becomes so integrated with theirs that when they let go of a responsibility or overlook an opportunity, you're the natural choice to step in. In this strategy, you're not just thinking about your next move, you're thinking about the entire relationship as a long-term structure. You're building something larger than a single win. By making them comfortable, you create a collaborative frame around the relationship, one that allows you to operate without triggering the natural human reflex to resist and compete. This doesn't mean you pretend to be something you're not. It means you manage what you reveal and when you reveal it. You don't have to lie about your goals. You simply don't broadcast them before the time is right. You keep your conversations focused on their priorities, their successes, their needs. This builds goodwill and reduces suspicion. And when suspicion is gone, access opens. With access, you can see the full board and decide where to move without having to push through unnecessary resistance. Jung's ideas about the shadow also come into play here. People often project their fears onto those they see as rivals. If you make them feel you're aligned, those projections don't stick. Instead, they project trust, even goodwill, onto you. And trust is a far better currency than fear when you're working toward a long-term position. You might see someone else advancing faster than you, taking a position you had your eye on, or gaining attention you feel you deserve. The temptation is to show your hand, to make your ambition clear. But if you think about it differently, seeing their rise as part of the cover you're building, you can use their momentum to your advantage. Their success becomes the very thing that distracts them from seeing yours. And here's where the real payoff comes. When you finally make your move, it doesn't feel like an attack to them. It doesn't even feel like a surprise. They may not understand how it happened, but they won't feel betrayed, because all along you've positioned yourself not as someone climbing over them, but as someone who's simply stepping into a space that naturally fits you. By the time they realize the shift, it's already complete. Rule 9. Create dependence, then step back. In every relationship, personal, professional, or strategic, there's a scale of influence. On one end, both parties could walk away tomorrow and lose little. On the other end, removing one person would cause the whole structure to wobble, maybe even collapse. The most enduring form of influence lives on that far end of the scale. It's not built on titles, fear, or loud displays of dominance. It's built quietly, almost invisibly, by becoming essential in ways no one else can. You do things for them, big and small, that no one else even thinks to do, and certainly not as well. And over time, without realizing it, they begin to rely on you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bees." It's a reminder that all relationships, even power dynamics, are systems. When you provide real value to that system, whether it's your insight, your stability, your problem-solving skills, or your ability to make the right move at the right moment, you become woven into its structure. You're not just helpful, you're part of its functioning, and when you're part of the functioning, your absence isn't neutral, it's disruptive. Carl Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." That truth shows up here in a different way. When people can rely on you, they don't have to face certain weaknesses or gaps in themselves. You fill them without fanfare. Maybe you offer clarity where they have confusion. Maybe you bring calm where they have chaos. Maybe you consistently deliver results in the one area they can't seem to master. Whatever it is, you take a burden off their shoulders. And humans, being human, quickly grow comfortable with that. Comfort becomes reliance. Reliance becomes dependence. Jung's theory of the shadow is also relevant here. People don't like to admit how much they depend on others. It feels like weakness, so they'll often convince themselves they could do without you, until they actually have to. By stepping back, you force that hidden truth into the light. They're confronted with the reality that without you, their world runs less smoothly, their decisions are less sharp, or their stress runs higher. And once they've felt that truth, they can't unfeel it. You don't build dependence by forcing your help on people or making them feel small without you. You do it by quietly showing up in the moments that matter most, often without seeking recognition. You make yourself necessary not by demanding it, but by consistently being the one who can be trusted to deliver when it counts. Think about a great mentor or leader you've known. At first, you might not have realized how much you leaned on their insight. But the first time you had to navigate something without them, you probably felt the difference immediately. That is the power of creating dependence. The absence is not just noticed, it's felt. And that feeling reshapes the other person's perception of you. In practical terms, this might look like consistently solving a problem they dread, offering a perspective they can't find anywhere else, or connecting them to opportunities they wouldn't have access to without you. Over time, they stop looking for other sources for those things. They come to you automatically. And when you step back, even briefly, they feel the void. They may not admit it openly, but internally, the thought is there. I need them. Dependence is built through habit. When your contribution becomes an unshakable part of their routine, they're not just choosing you, they're structured around you. Remove a key piece of structure and the whole thing shifts. Sometimes it even destabilizes. Stepping back doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be as simple as not volunteering for a task you'd normally take on, or letting a meeting run without your input, or delaying your usual check-in. The goal isn't to abandon, it's to create a moment of contrast. You're allowing them to see, in real time, what life without your involvement feels like. That's a powerful teacher. And here's the long-term benefit. When you return, your value isn't just understood, it's reinforced. They don't just think you're helpful, they know they operate better with you there. That knowledge shapes future decisions. They're more likely to include you, consult you, and keep you close because they've already felt what it's like when you're not around. The Stoics believed in the power of measured action. Epictetus said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." In influence, few wants means needing to exert less visible effort to maintain your position. When you've built true dependence, you no longer have to push to be included. Your absence ensures they'll pull you in. That's the quiet advantage of this rule. In the end, creating dependence and stepping back isn't about trapping someone. It's about making your contribution undeniable. It's about building your role so deeply into their world that removing you would mean restructuring the entire thing. And when people realize that, they'll hold on to you not out of obligation, but out of the instinct to keep what makes their life easier, smoother, and more successful. Rule 10. The debt they can't forget. Some acts of generosity are so significant that they stay with a person for life. Not because you keep reminding them, but because deep down they know they could never fully repay you. That knowledge creates a subtle, lasting connection, one that can shape the way they see you, the way they treat you, and the way they make decisions around you. It's not about control in the crude sense. It's about the quiet gravity that forms when you've given someone something of real weight, whether it's an opportunity, support in a critical moment, or a solution no one else could offer. True favors, the kind that become unforgettable, come from this place. They aren't offered with strings attached. They aren't transactional. They're genuine acts of help at the exact moment they're needed most. And precisely because they're rare, they leave a deep imprint. When you give in a way that changes the trajectory of someone's life, even slightly, you create a transformation in the relationship itself. They don't just remember what you did, they remember who you became in that moment. And whether they realize it or not, they begin to measure their actions against that moment. The Stoics valued generosity as a virtue, but they also understood the psychology of human nature. Seneca said, "A gift consists not in what is done or given, but in the intention of the giver or doer. A sincere favor, offered without visible expectation, creates something more powerful than gratitude. It creates a lingering sense of responsibility. The other person knows they've been given something valuable, and while you might never bring it up, they'll feel the quiet weight of it in their interactions with you. Think of it like planting a seed that grows in the mind of the receiver. You don't tend to it every day, you don't hover over it, but it's there, rooted. Over time, it shapes their perception. They may not say it out loud, but when decisions are made, when loyalties are tested, that memory plays its part. They'll hesitate before acting against you. They'll lean toward supporting you, even when they don't fully understand why. And here's the key: you never demand repayment. You don't have to. By leaving the debt unspoken, you allow it to live naturally in their conscience. The discomfort of knowing they can't repay you fully keeps the connection alive far longer than a direct obligation ever could. In a way, it's the lack of closure that gives it its staying power. In the end, the debt they can't forget isn't about keeping someone tied to you in chains. It's about shaping the relationship into one where loyalty grows without force. You gave without asking, you helped without boasting, and in doing so, you became a fixture in their personal history. And once you're in someone's history in that way, you're very hard to erase. Rule 11. Let them compromise for you. One of the most revealing moments in any relationship, whether personal, professional, or even political, is when someone willingly bends their own rules for you. It's a small shift at first, almost invisible. They might share information they normally keep private. They might overlook a standard they usually enforce. But in that moment, something important happens. They've made a choice that subtly binds them to you. And it's not because you pushed them, it's because you created the space for them to do it on their own. You can't control another person's values, but you can create an environment where their values start to bend naturally in your direction. That's not manipulation, it's influence. And influence comes from consistency, trust, and making people feel safe enough to lower their defenses. When someone compromises for you, they often justify it to themselves in ways that protect their self-image. They tell themselves you're different, that the situation is unique, or that it's just this once. But deep down, they know they've taken a step they wouldn't take for just anyone. And that realization doesn't just shift how they see you, it changes the dynamic entirely. But human behavior isn't always ideal. People make exceptions for those they feel a bond with. And once they've made one exception, they're more likely to make another. This is where loyalty deepens, not because they owe you, but because they've invested a part of themselves into the connection. The more they've invested, the more they have to lose by stepping away. The key is that you never force this moment. You don't corner them into breaking their rules. You let it happen organically. You might simply be there at the right time, listening when they need to talk. You might be the one who understands their frustrations without judgment. You might offer a perspective that makes them feel safe enough to speak more openly than they usually would. Before they know it, they've crossed a small line. And in doing so, they've created a shared secret, a mutual understanding that sets your relationship apart from the rest. Seneca said, "One of the most beautiful qualities of true friendship is to understand and to be understood." Understanding someone so well that they feel comfortable bending their own norms for you is a form of closeness. But it also has a lasting psychological effect. People are wired to protect the things they've invested in. If they've compromised for you once, protecting you becomes a way of protecting their own choice. Over time, this creates a bond that's far more resilient than one built only on words or promises. They're not just loyal because they like you. They're loyal because they've already acted on your behalf in ways that set you apart. And that kind of loyalty is hard to shake, because to turn on you would be to admit that they compromised for nothing. In the end, letting people compromise for you isn't about making them weaker. It's about allowing them to connect with you in a way that's uniquely theirs. It's about being the person they feel drawn to support, even when it means bending their own rules. And once that line is crossed, they'll guard you as they guard themselves, because in their mind, the two have quietly become connected. Rule 12. Break groups from the inside. Strong groups rarely fall because of outside attacks. More often, they crumble from within. History, philosophy, and even everyday life show this over and over. Unity is powerful, but it's also fragile when trust begins to crack. You don't have to break down the walls if you can loosen the bricks one by one. And the easiest way to loosen them is not with confrontation, but with subtlety. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." If a group is the obstacle between you and your goal, you don't always need to go head-to-head with it. Instead, you can let the group's own structure, personalities, and hidden tensions do the work for you. All you have to do is create the smallest shift in perception, and human nature will take it from there. People often believe they fully understand their allies, their friends, their teammates. But those assumptions can be fragile. By introducing just a hint of doubt, something small enough to be dismissed, yet sticky enough to linger, you give their own minds the tools to question each other. And once the seed is planted, it doesn't take much for suspicion to grow. Epictetus taught, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the view which they take of them." This is the essence of breaking alliances from the inside. You're not directly causing conflict. You're shaping how they see each other. Maybe it's a quiet remark. "I'm sure they didn't mean anything by it, but did you notice they didn't defend you in that meeting?" Or perhaps it's an observation left hanging in the air. "Funny how they're spending more time with that other group lately." You're not telling them what to think. You're simply inviting them to notice. And the human mind, once curious, will keep pulling on that thread. Seneca once said, "We are always complaining that our days are few and acting as though there will be no end of them." In the same way, people in close alliances often act as though their unity is permanent. They forget that relationships, whether between two people or 20, are living things that can weaken if not cared for. By introducing a sense that the bond isn't as solid as it appears, you force members to reevaluate. Sometimes they overcompensate and expose their own insecurities. Other times they quietly withdraw, weakening the entire group without realizing they're doing it. The most effective part of this strategy is patience. You don't try to tear the whole structure down in one move. That's when people notice and rally together. Instead, you let the doubt settle in, then step back. They'll replay moments in their minds, question motives, and start seeing signs of betrayal that may not even exist. Eventually, the alliance is no longer united against you. They're too busy guarding themselves from each other. In the end, breaking a group from the inside is less about destruction and more about influence. You're not tearing down the walls. You're letting time, perception, and doubt do it for you. And by the time the dust settles, the alliance will have undone itself, leaving you to move forward without ever having swung a single blow. Rule 13. Reflect their doubts back at them. Everyone carries a private set of insecurities, small shadows that follow them no matter how confident they appear on the surface. For some, it's a quiet voice that says they're not good enough. For others, it's a lingering doubt about whether they belong where they are. These insecurities shape the way they speak, the choices they make, and even how they interpret the actions of others. Most people spend a lifetime hiding them, building layers of personality and performance to keep them out of sight. But here's the truth. Those insecurities are often the deepest point of connection you can have with someone. Not because you exploit them, but because you acknowledge them in a way that feels safe, subtle, and strangely comforting. Insecurity lives in that unconscious space. It drives behavior in ways the person themselves may not fully understand. By reflecting it back gently, you bring it into the light, not in a way that humiliates them, but in a way that says, "I understand this about you, and I still value you." It's a quiet mirror, one that lets them see themselves without feeling exposed. The real art is subtlety. You never want to hammer someone's insecurity into the spotlight. That breeds defensiveness. Instead, you weave it into a compliment, a gentle observation, or even a shared laugh. You might say, "You've got a way of surprising people who underestimate you," which validates both their capability and the truth that they often feel underestimated. They'll remember the praise, but they'll also feel the understanding underneath it. Jung's work on the shadow self reminds us that people resist facing the parts of themselves they dislike. They project strength, competence, and certainty as a way to keep those parts hidden. But when someone else notices without judgment, it can be oddly freeing. It can even lead them to open up further because they no longer feel the need to hide. That's when conversations deepen, trust strengthens, and alliances form in ways that feel unshakable. In professional settings, this can be an incredibly effective form of influence. When a leader acknowledges a team member's doubts in a supportive way, without pretending they don't exist, it creates loyalty. That person will work harder for the leader who understands their challenges and still believes in them. In personal relationships, it can transform the dynamic entirely. Instead of being a source of competition or judgment, you become the safe place they can return to, knowing they won't have to keep up the performance with you. This kind of influence is durable because it's tied to emotion, not transaction. People forget what you give them in material terms, but they don't forget how you made them feel about themselves. If you've helped someone feel seen and accepted in their imperfect humanity, that memory becomes part of the foundation of your relationship. And when people are deciding who to trust, who to follow, or who to protect, they turn toward those who've made them feel that way. The Stoics would caution, however, that this skill comes with responsibility. It must be grounded in virtue. Epictetus said, "It is the nature of the wise to resist pleasures, but the foolish to be a slave to them." The pleasure here is the temptation to use someone's insecurity against them. That path may yield short-term gain, but it destroys long-term trust. The wiser path is to use your understanding to strengthen bonds, not to weaken them. Over time, that integrity will magnify your influence because people will know your insight is paired with loyalty. Even in conflict, reflecting someone's doubts can shift the dynamic in your favor. If you acknowledge their perspective in a way that quietly touches on their insecurity, they're more likely to reconsider their position without feeling attacked. For example, in a tense negotiation, you might say, "I know you've taken risks before that others didn't believe in, and they've worked out well for you." It validates their courage while subtly reminding them that they've faced skepticism before, potentially making them more open to seeing your point. When you combine your awareness of someone's insecurities with genuine respect for their strengths, you create a complete picture that feels balanced and trustworthy. They're less likely to hide from you, more likely to collaborate, and far more likely to see you as someone who truly gets them in a way others don't. Over time, this approach creates a kind of emotional imprint. Even if the person doesn't consciously realize why they trust you, they'll feel it. They'll think of you in moments of uncertainty, not because you've given them all the answers, but because you've shown them they don't have to hide their questions from you. That's rare. And in a world where most relationships stay on the surface, rare is powerful. Rule 14. Keep your hands clean. There are moments in life when something decisive needs to happen, something that will cause ripples, provoke reactions, maybe even ignite conflict. These moments are unavoidable if you aim to lead, influence, or protect what matters. But there's a truth that separates those who last from those who burn out. You don't always have to be the one who carries out the action. The most strategic move is often to set the stage, guide the outcome, and let others handle the execution. By doing so, you preserve your position, your credibility, and your ability to keep influencing the next move without carrying the stain of the last one. Aristotle wrote, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." This is a reminder that you can be deeply involved in shaping an outcome without attaching your name to the act itself. You can think through every angle, anticipate the results, and design the steps, but allow someone else to be the visible agent. This isn't about avoiding responsibility for the sake of your image. It's about protecting your capacity to act again tomorrow. If you're constantly associated with the hardest cuts, the harshest measures, or the most unpopular changes, you'll quickly find doors closing in front of you. Plato observed, "A wise man will desire to be ever with him who is better than himself." That means surrounding yourself with capable people who can carry out what needs to be done without you having to step into the center of the storm. This is part of the architecture of influence, building a network of trusted actors whose skills and reputations can handle the immediate action, while your role remains that of the strategist, the one whose vision keeps everything aligned. When you are in the position to make difficult calls, you have to ask yourself not only what needs to be done, but also who should be seen doing it. Aristotle wrote, "The more you know, the more you realize you don't know." This humility applies to execution as well. There are situations where, even though you know what the right move is, you are not the best person to be the face of that move. Your involvement might inflame tensions, cause resistance, or create a perception that distracts from the result itself. Plato offered another layer to this when he said, "The measure of a man is what he does with power." Power is not just the ability to act, it's the wisdom to know when not to act directly. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remain in the background, shaping the conditions so the result is inevitable, regardless of who carries it out. You become the architect, not the laborer, the composer, not the performer. The music still exists because of you, but others play the notes. Consider politics, business, or any hierarchical system. If you're the leader who personally swings the axe every time a cut must be made, you become the villain in every narrative. But if you're the leader who sets the vision, builds consensus, and lets the right hands carry out the hard work, you maintain your position as the steady guide rather than the executioner. This allows you to keep navigating the ship without having to fight mutinies at every turn. There's another dimension to keeping your hands clean: plausible deniability. Aristotle said, "He who has never learned to obey cannot be a good commander." This means understanding the chain of action from both ends, knowing when to follow the current and when to quietly direct it. When you guide without overtly controlling, others take ownership of the action. They believe they're acting from their own decision, even if you've helped shape the path to that choice. And because they own it, you don't carry the public cost of it. Keeping your hands clean does not mean avoiding responsibility altogether. It doesn't mean turning a blind eye to what must be done. It means being involved enough to ensure the right outcome, while removing yourself from the line of fire in a way that keeps your influence intact. Avoiding the hard moves entirely is cowardice. Directing them without unnecessary exposure is wisdom. Some people will see this as manipulation, but in truth, it's closer to stewardship. Aristotle said, "The roots of education are bitter, but the fruit is sweet." The education here is the discipline of restraint, learning to hold back your impulse to be visibly in control of every action. The sweet fruit is the longevity of your leadership and the preservation of your ability to act when the stakes are at their highest. Many leaders fear being seen as inactive. They think if they're not visibly acting, they're losing relevance. But the wise know that sometimes it's better to be the hand behind the curtain than the one holding the sword in public. Visibility is not the same as power. In fact, the more visible you are in every hard decision, the less room you have to maneuver later. Plato understood this dynamic well. The beginning is the most important part of the work. The beginning is where you set the plan, gather the right people, and create the conditions for success. Once that's in place, you can step back and let the structure you've built carry the action forward. By the time it reaches its conclusion, your role may not be obvious to outsiders, but your influence is embedded in every step. In the long run, this method allows you to operate with greater freedom. You avoid becoming the lightning rod for every controversy, and you preserve your relationships with multiple sides of an issue. Aristotle's teaching, "Wishing to be friends is quick work, but friendship is a slow ripening fruit," reminds us that relationships take time to build, but can be destroyed in a single, poorly handled conflict. Keeping your hands clean protects those slow-built connections from being sacrificed unnecessarily. Ultimately, Plato's question, "What is honored in a country will be cultivated there," speaks to the legacy you build. If your legacy is that of a reckless enforcer, you'll cultivate fear and resistance. If your legacy is that of a steady strategist who can guide outcomes without leaving unnecessary scars, you'll cultivate loyalty and respect, and that is a far more stable base for long-term influence. Keeping your hands clean doesn't mean never getting them dirty. It means being deliberate about when and how you do it. It means knowing that your ability to shape the future depends not just on your capacity to act, but on your ability to still be standing, still be trusted, and still be in the game when the next big decision comes. Rule 15. Listen until they spill everything. Most people are far more eager to be heard than they are to listen. In conversations, they wait for their turn to speak, instead of paying attention to what's actually being said. And because of that, the rare person who truly listens becomes magnetic. People can feel it when your attention is fully on them. It's disarming. It makes them open up, sometimes more than they planned to. In a world that rewards constant talking, the one who can remain silent becomes the one who learns the most. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I shall gladly change. I seek the truth, which never harmed anyone." That attitude, seeking truth rather than dominance, changes the way you engage in conversation. You're not waiting for an opportunity to show you're right. You're creating space for the other person to reveal what's true for them. That space, handled with patience, can yield insights no amount of forceful questioning ever could. When you give someone the floor without jumping in to correct them, you often learn not only about them, but about your own instincts, your urge to interrupt, to defend, to prove. By holding back, you develop discipline, and you also watch how their words naturally unfold. Given enough time, people will often tell you everything you need to know, sometimes even things they wish they had kept to themselves. When you resist the urge to fill silences, you hand the other person a subtle but powerful pressure, the need to keep talking. Most people are uncomfortable with long pauses. They rush to break the quiet, and in doing so, they often wander into truths they were trying to avoid. This works in every setting: negotiations, personal relationships, even casual conversations. A short, well-placed question followed by genuine silence can draw out far more than an hour of rapid-fire inquiries. Something as simple as, "What happened next?" or "How did that make you feel?" can open a door they didn't even realize they were walking through. Seneca said, "Most powerful is he who has himself in his own power." In conversation, that means controlling your impulse to speak. The more you stay in command of yourself, the more others reveal. It's not about manipulation, it's about patience. It's about giving someone enough room to trust you with their truth, even if they don't consciously intend to share it. Over time, being the person who listens deeply builds more than just knowledge. It builds influence. People begin to seek you out, not because you always give advice, but because they feel lighter after speaking to you. And ironically, the less you talk, the more weight your words carry when you finally do speak. In the end, listening until they spill everything isn't about tricking someone into confessing. It's about understanding the power of quiet presence. The less you rush to fill the silence, the more the truth will rise to fill it for you. And in that truth lies the kind of understanding that gives you an edge in both connection and decision-making. Rule 16. Be predictable until it matters. People feel safest when they can predict you. They like knowing how you'll react, what you'll say, and where you stand. Predictability gives them comfort, but it also gives them control. If they can anticipate your every move, they can shape their actions around you. That's why the wisest approach is to be steady most of the time, but to keep one card hidden, something they can't account for. When the stakes are high, that's when you break the rhythm, and the shift catches them off guard. Being consistent in your behavior is part of that strength. It builds trust, and it creates a baseline for how others interact with you. But true mastery comes when you know exactly when to disrupt that pattern, because in moments that matter most, predictability is a weakness, and unpredictability becomes a weapon. To others, breaking your pattern might look like chaos, but to you, it's part of a larger design. It's the intentional moment where you step outside your usual pace, voice, or approach to achieve maximum impact. It's the sudden silence when they expect a reaction, or the decisive move when they assume you'll hesitate. The Stoics valued steadiness, but they also understood the importance of timing. Epictetus taught, "First learn the meaning of what you say, and then speak." That's patience, but it's also strategy. It means holding to your normal rhythm until the exact moment when breaking it will serve you best. Just as a soldier waits for the right time to advance, You wait until the opportunity is most favorable to act in a way they didn't see coming. Consider how this works in relationships or negotiations. If you're always accommodating, they expect agreement. If you're always firm, they expect resistance. Either way, they prepare for your usual stance. But the moment you flip the script, agreeing when they're ready for a fight, or standing your ground when they're sure you'll yield, you force them into unfamiliar territory. They lose the comfort of their plan, and now they're reacting to you instead of controlling the exchange. The key is balance. Too much unpredictability and people stop trusting you. Too much consistency and they stop respecting your edge. The art lies in being dependable enough to build security, but surprising enough to keep them from ever feeling entirely safe in their assumptions about you. In the end, being predictable until it matters is about holding the power of surprise in reserve. You're not erratic, you're deliberate. You're calm water most of the time, but when the storm comes, you can shift the tides without warning. And that single, well-timed change in course can alter the outcome in ways constant motion never could. Rule 17. Make your presence felt in absence. Most people think power is something you exercise in the moment, when you're present, speaking, making decisions, directing others. And while that's one form of it, the most enduring influence doesn't depend on being in the room at all. The most powerful presence is the one that's still felt when you're not there. When people pause before acting because they can imagine what you'd say. When they measure their choices against your standards, even without your voice in their ear. When they adjust their behavior because the idea of you is still in the room. That's a kind of influence that travels with them, and it's far more valuable than the kind that disappears the moment you leave. Over time, if you consistently embody certain principles, your color begins to stain the people around you, not in the sense of controlling them, but in shaping the mental framework they use. You become part of their internal compass. They may not even realize it, but when they're weighing a decision, they're asking themselves, what would they do? That's presence in absence. You've embedded yourself into their decision-making process without needing to be physically there. Seneca wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." If you live in such a way that people associate you with improvement, clearer thinking, better discipline, more deliberate action, they will unconsciously hold on to your presence. Even in your absence, they will still consult you internally because they've linked your influence with their own progress. Leaving that kind of imprint requires consistency. You can't be unpredictable in your values one day and expect them to define you the next. People need to see your steadiness under pressure, your calm in conflict, your fairness in judgment. Over time, that steadiness becomes your signature, and signatures don't fade quickly. This principle also works in the realm of power and strategy. When you've established yourself as someone who delivers results, who makes sharp decisions, or who speaks with authority, that reputation follows you. Even if you're not in a meeting or discussion, people will still factor in what they think you'd say or do before making a move. In effect, you've extended yourself into spaces you're not physically in. That's reach without effort. Jung's work on archetypes can help explain why this works. Once people have assigned you a role in their mental world, mentor, strategist, moral compass, that role continues to operate even without your presence. You've become a symbolic figure in their thinking. And symbols are powerful because they can be summoned instantly without the original person being there. Excellence practiced as a habit leaves residue. It sticks to the people around you. If you regularly demonstrate thoughtful problem solving, they'll start approaching problems with more thoughtfulness themselves. If you consistently operate with integrity, they'll weigh integrity more heavily in their own choices. Your habits become a model, and models survive absence. One way to strengthen this is to set clear expectations through your behavior, not just your words. If you're known for high standards in work quality, you don't have to be there to enforce them. People will meet them simply because they associate your name with excellence. If you're known for asking hard questions before decisions, they'll start asking those questions themselves before you can. This is how you train your presence into the system around you. The Stoics believed in living as though you were always being observed, not out of paranoia, but as a way to stay aligned with your own principles. When you live that way, the impression you make is strong enough that your presence doesn't depend on your physical body being there. You become an influence in people's minds, and influence in the mind is more enduring than influence in the moment. The beauty of this rule is that it compounds over time. The longer you live in alignment with your values, the deeper your presence roots itself in the people and systems you touch. You can walk away from a role, a team, or even a relationship, and still your way of doing things will linger. The way you set meetings, the way you resolved disputes, the way you handled setbacks, these become reference points for those who remain. This isn't just about legacy, it's about leverage. When people continue to operate with your standards in mind, you maintain influence without effort. You don't have to fight for relevance or visibility. Your absence speaks for you. And in many cases, your absence speaks louder than your presence ever could, because it forces people to recognize just how much you shaped their thinking. Seneca also said, "While we teach, we learn." As you leave your presence in others, you also reinforce it in yourself. The clearer your message, the more consistent your behavior, the more you deepen the connection between who you are and the influence you project. This makes your presence in absence even stronger, because it's not built on perception alone, it's built on reality. In the end, making your presence felt in absence comes down to this: live and act in such a way that you're impossible to forget. Let your standards, your discipline, and your example be so consistent that they become part of the environment around you. When people can carry your influence into rooms you'll never enter, you've achieved a level of power that doesn't fade when you walk away. It expands. Rule 18. Never threaten. Some of the most intimidating people you'll ever meet are the ones who never raise their voice, never make dramatic declarations, and never issue direct threats. They don't need to. Their power comes from leaving space for your imagination to do the work. And the truth is, imagination is far more dangerous than anything they could say out loud. When people don't know exactly what you might do, they fill in the blanks themselves, and those imagined possibilities are almost always worse than reality. Threats are the language of the insecure, of those who need to announce their power to feel it. The Stoic way is different. It's about remaining steady, deliberate, and calm enough to let your actions, not your words, shape how others see you. When you hold your cards close, you keep others off balance because they can't prepare for something they can't define. People who never threaten understand this. They've learned that real strength comes from control over their temper, their impulses, and their need to prove themselves. It's not passivity, it's patience. They know the less they reveal, the more others will wonder, and the wondering itself becomes a source of unease. Epictetus taught, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." This applies to power too. You don't need to correct people's assumptions about what you might or might not do. If someone underestimates you, let them. If someone tries to provoke you, don't respond in kind. The silence, the lack of reaction, becomes the most unnerving thing in the room, because when you don't respond, they have no idea what's coming next, or if anything is coming at all. Think about how this plays out in real life. A boss who threatens to fire someone at every small mistake eventually loses credibility. But the boss who says nothing, who simply notes the error and moves on without reaction, often inspires more self-correction, because the employee can't stop thinking about what that silence means. It's the same in negotiations, relationships, or rivalries. The moment you openly state your intentions, you give the other person a chance to prepare their defense. But when you keep them guessing, they prepare for everything, and in doing so, they tire themselves out. Delay is the opposite of threat. It's a pause that lets the other person's mind run ahead of you. In that space, fear grows naturally without you forcing it. By the time you act, if you act at all, they've already built the narrative in their mind, and that narrative is often more powerful than any direct action you could have taken. The beauty of never threatening is that it frees you from unnecessary escalation. You don't draw attention to your next move. You don't commit yourself to a course of action that you might later regret. You simply hold your ground, let them speak, let them guess, and let them live with the uncertainty. That uncertainty keeps them cautious. It makes them hesitate, and in any form of competition or conflict, hesitation is where the advantage is won. In the end, unspoken power always outlasts loud declarations. A threat dies the moment it's made. But the fear of the unknown, that can live on for weeks, months, or even years. The goal isn't to frighten, it's to remain unreadable enough that others think twice before crossing you, without you ever having to say a single word. Rule 19. Delay your response. The first instinct when someone wrongs you is to react immediately, to defend yourself, to correct the insult, the betrayal, or the harm before it can spread. But quick reactions are rarely the most effective ones. They may satisfy your emotions in the moment, but they often come at the cost of strategy. The wiser path, though far more difficult, is to pause, to breathe, to wait until the right moment, when your response will not just be noticed but remembered. Your enemy might act on impulse. They might move from anger, from pride, or from fear. But you can choose patience. The Stoics understood that emotional control is the foundation of power. By delaying your response, you remove yourself from the emotional chaos of the moment and step into the clarity of calculation. This is the mindset of someone who waits. On the surface, it may feel like nothing is happening, but underneath, the order is forming. Waiting gives you the chance to see the whole picture, how others react, where the weaknesses emerge, and which opportunities reveal themselves naturally over time. By holding your reaction, you're doing more than keeping calm. You're actively shaping the battlefield. When someone believes they've gotten away with harming you, they lower their guard. They relax. They stop protecting themselves from the consequences of their actions. And it's in that moment, when they've convinced themselves they've won, that your response has the most impact. Think about the difference between a punch thrown in the heat of anger and a move made at the perfect time in a chess game. The first is impulsive and predictable. The second is deliberate, often decisive, and impossible to recover from once it's made. When you delay, you gain the ability to act like the chess player, not the street fighter. Often the situation will shift in ways that make your position stronger without you lifting a finger. Sometimes the person who wronged you will reveal more of their intentions or even trap themselves in their own mistakes. Other times, you'll see a far better way to respond than you could have imagined in the heat of the moment. The beauty of delaying your response is that it shifts the power dynamic. While they may have felt in control at first, the longer you stay silent, the more uncertainty creeps in. They start to wonder if you've forgotten, if you're planning something, or if their actions will come back to haunt them. That uncertainty is its own kind of pressure, and it works in your favor. When you finally act, the impact is multiplied. You're not reacting to their move anymore. You're making your own, on your own terms, with the benefit of time, perspective, and precision. And that's what makes it so devastating. Not because you sought to destroy them, but because you waited until the right moment to act in a way that could not be undone. In the end, delaying your response isn't about passivity, it's about strength. It's the ability to value timing over impulse, strategy over ego. The Stoics would say this is the difference between being ruled by emotion and ruling over it. And when you can rule over your own reactions, you can often shape the outcome of the entire situation. Rule 20. Become a system, not just a person. Some people make themselves valuable by what they can do in a moment. They're skilled, they're dependable, they can handle a crisis. But the moment they leave, their influence disappears with them. Then there are those who operate on an entirely different level. They don't just do the work, they design the way the work gets done. They don't just give advice, they shape the very way people think. Over time, their methods, their patterns, and their standards become so ingrained in the environment that removing them means breaking the structure itself. That's when you stop being helpful or talented and become something far more powerful. You become the system. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What we do now echoes in eternity." Systems are echoes. They keep working long after the person who built them is gone. If your goal is lasting influence, the kind that remains even when you're not in the room, you can't rely on personality alone. Charisma fades when you're absent. Personal charm can't be replicated. But a process, a standard, or a framework, that's something others can't help but follow because it's built into the way things function. Becoming a system is not about branding yourself or making big promises. It's about action repeated so consistently that it becomes the norm. When you operate with such discipline that your way of doing things becomes the way of doing things, people unconsciously adopt your methods. They might not even realize they're following the structures you've built, but they are, and that's what makes your influence harder to remove. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus taught, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." If you want to turn yourself into a system, you can't just tell people how things should be done. You have to model it until it's instinctive for those around you. When you do this well, your influence no longer relies on constant reminders or direct involvement. It lives in habits, in expectations, in the very language and rhythm of the environment. Think about great leaders, teachers, or strategists you've known. The ones who left a permanent mark weren't just memorable personalities. They left behind methods, rituals, and a mindset that continued to shape decisions long after they were gone. In a company, that might be a way of approaching problem solving that everyone now follows. In a family, it might be a set of principles about how to handle conflict or make decisions. In a team, it could be a communication style or an approach to planning that becomes second nature. If you want to become a system, your excellence has to be repeatable, teachable, and adaptable. It can't be locked inside your personal skill set. It has to be something others can carry on without you. That's the difference between a specialist and a system builder. A specialist is valuable while present. A system builder is valuable forever. From a strategic perspective, becoming a system also gives you leverage. When your way of doing things is so deeply embedded that removing you would disrupt everything, you gain a kind of security few others have. People may replace an individual, but they'll hesitate to dismantle the framework that holds everything together. In this way, you become difficult, not just to replace, but to even imagine functioning without. Jung's insights into the collective unconscious apply here. Systems tap into patterns that are bigger than the individual. They create a shared mental model that others use to navigate reality. Once that model is established, it stops being yours in name, but remains yours in function. People stop thinking of it as your way and start thinking of it as the way. That's when you've succeeded in embedding yourself so completely that you've become invisible but indispensable. This approach works in every sphere. In business, a founder who becomes a system builds a company culture that operates smoothly without them. In politics, a leader who becomes a system leaves behind institutions, policies, or alliances that remain intact for decades. In personal life, a parent who becomes a system leaves values and traditions that shape their family's choices for generations. And here's the real power. Once you've become a system, you no longer have to push to maintain influence. The structure you've built carries you forward. Others will defend it, protect it, and sustain it because it has become their normal. In many cases, they'll fight to keep it in place even more fiercely than you would because it benefits them directly. Building yourself into a system can be slow, difficult work. It requires repetition, patience, and a willingness to think long-term. But once it's in place, the rewards are lasting. Your influence stops being a fleeting presence and becomes an enduring framework. And that framework is far harder to remove than any individual could ever be. In the end, becoming a system is about shifting from personal importance to structural importance. When you achieve that, you're no longer asking people to value you. You've made yourself the foundation of what they already value. And when someone is part of the foundation, removing them isn't just inconvenient, it risks bringing the whole thing down. That's a position of quiet, lasting power. Rule 21. Let your name work for you. True power is when you don't have to announce yourself. You don't have to constantly remind people of who you are, what you've done, or what you're capable of, because your name has already done that work for you. It arrives before you do. It changes the tone of conversations. It shapes expectations. Sometimes it even silences a room. And when your name carries weight, people handle it differently. They might avoid saying it casually. They might lower their voices when it comes up. Not because they've forgotten it, but because they understand that speaking it invokes something that carries consequences. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, they will not care how devout you have been, but will welcome you based on the virtues you have lived by." This isn't just about moral virtue. It's about the lived consistency of who you are. The weight your name carries comes from your actions, not your words. People remember the moments you showed strength when it was hard, the decisions you made under pressure, the way you treated others when you had nothing to gain. Over time, these moments form the story of your name. You can't talk your way into having a name that matters. You have to live your way into it. Every time you follow through on your word, every time you choose discipline over comfort, every time you deliver when it counts, you add another layer to your name's meaning. People begin to attach certain expectations to it, and those expectations, good or bad, spread far beyond your own voice. If you want your name to stand for something specific, excellence, integrity, precision, resilience, you must decide that privately, long before the public sees it. And once you've decided, you must live in a way that's so consistent that those qualities become inseparable from your name in the minds of others. When your name works for you, it does more than open doors. It changes the way people approach you entirely. They think twice before wasting your time. They prepare more carefully before presenting ideas to you. They reconsider speaking against you unless they're certain of their position. Sometimes they don't even want to be on the opposite side of an issue, not because you've threatened them, but because they know your track record. This is a form of quiet leverage that no amount of loudness can match. If your name is strong, you no longer have to crave constant recognition. You can move more quietly, make fewer public moves, and still have influence, because the influence is carried by the memory of who you are and what you've done. Your name becomes self-sustaining. Jung's concept of the archetype helps explain why this works on such a deep psychological level. Once your name becomes symbolic in someone's mind, representing a certain quality, role, or authority, it stops being just a label and becomes a mental trigger. Mentioning your name brings up not just the thought of you, but the emotional associations and past experiences tied to you. This is why the most powerful names can inspire loyalty in some and fear in others. They have become more than a person. They are an idea. Building this kind of name takes time and patience. It requires consistency under all conditions, not just when it's easy. People watch what you do when no one is watching. They remember how you behave when you're losing just as much as when you're winning. They take note of how you treat those with less power than you. Every one of those moments is a brushstroke on the canvas of your name. And when you've painted enough of them in the same tone, the picture becomes impossible to mistake. When you reach this point, your presence becomes optional for influence. The mere mention of you can change the course of conversations. Opportunities can come your way without you seeking them out. And conflicts can be resolved in your favor without you lifting a finger, because the weight of your name alone can tip the scale. In the end, letting your name work for you is the highest form of sustainable influence. It's the point where you no longer have to push to be seen or heard, because your history does the speaking for you. It's where your name has moved beyond being something you own and has become something that owns a place in the minds, and sometimes the fears, of others. The Stoics would call this the natural result of living in alignment with your values over time. And once you have it, you'll realize you've built something far stronger than fame or popularity. You've built a legacy that moves even when you stand still. Power isn't just about what you do when the world is watching. It's about the quiet discipline, the unseen choices, and the lasting mark you leave on others. The Stoics knew this. True strength is built in silence, and it endures long after the moment has passed. If this spoke to you, there's another video on the screen right now that will take you even deeper into the art of living with clarity, resilience, and purpose. Watch it next and keep sharpening the mind that shapes your life. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal, where ancient wisdom becomes your daily advantage.